So let's elaborate on minority groups, and let's talk about two ways to become part of the minority group. How can you become part of the minority group? Good question. Well, let's look at a picture right here, and this is a real sign, and it's of people running across the road. And what happens, this is from California. It's showing a picture of a family crossing, running over a road to, be careful as they cross the street. So that leads us to the first answer. How do you become part of the minority group? Is you cross the border. You go into an area where now you become part of the minority group. Your status has now changed. So one of the ways to become part of the minority group is that you go into an area where your rights are now a little bit different. So these people are choosing to cross the border. It is their choice to do so. Sometimes people don't have the choice to cross the border. It's been enforced upon them. So here are the old slave trade routes. And it says overview of the slave trade routes out of Africa. And you see many of them went to Brazil. And then over here you see that they went into the Caribbean and into the United States and to Jamaica and Cuba and so forth. Now these people did not choose to cross the border. Here are a couple of pictures. It says White Australia. Australia for the Australians. What happened is from 1901 to 1973, you could not move to Australia if you were part of the minority, Asian or black, or you had to be primarily from Europe. And here it says no Chinese. And this is anti-Asian philosophy that was also being done in Australia as well. Here we see Mexico. Mexico used to be all of this, and then the people that lived there were fine, but then the border crossed them. The second way to become part of the minority group is the border crosses you. You're in an area, you live there, and then finally the border, it crosses you, and now you become part of the minority group. In Australia, they had the Australian Aborigines. And what happened is the Europeans went over to Australia, and just like these individuals, they became part of the minority group because the border crossed them. Let's talk about famous Australians. Crocodile Hunter, Russell Crowe, famous actors from Australia. But the original Australians, as we were saying, are the Australian Aborigines. And here we see some little kids, and they're holding their baby kangaroos, which are called joeys. And here we see they are enslaved because the Europeans went over, and now they became part of the minority group. Another example of the border crossing you. When we think of Canadians, sometimes we'll think of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, right? But again, these are white Europeans. The original Canadians are right here. The First Nation people, Inuits, if you will. And these were the original Canadians, and then once again, Europeans crossed over. So, examples of the border crossing you could say Australian Aborigines or the First Nation people of Canada. Let's talk about the difference between discrimination and prejudice. Many times people use these two words at the same time in the same sentence, but these two words actually mean very different things, and I want to make sure you know the difference between discrimination and prejudice. Some people practice one but not the other. One of these words is an action, the other is simply an attitude. Do you know the difference? Do you know which one is the action and which one do you think is the action? Which one do you think is just a thought? Discrimination is the action. Prejudice is just an attitude. Many people are prejudiced, but they actually don't do anything about it. They just have a prejudice against certain individuals. I know that in high schools, sometimes the seniors have a prejudice against the freshmen. Now, they don't actually do anything about it. They don't actually act on it. They just think that they're immature, but they don't really discriminate in any form. And then sometimes people have to discriminate because of their job, but in actuality, they don't really have a prejudice. For example, in World War II, many of the soldiers that were German, they had to discriminate. But in actuality, maybe they didn't have a prejudice. They just had to go along with it. Let's talk about this individual right here. He fought discrimination and prejudice for a very long time. He's a very famous sociologist, author. His name is W.E.B. Du Bois. He's an African American. He earned a PhD from Harvard, and he was a professor in Atlanta. And he co-founded what is known as the NAACP. Now, if you don't know what that stands for, it's for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And he wrote over 20 books on, discrimination and prejudice. And he died at the age of 95. And ironically, when he passed away, literally the next day, Martin Luther King gave his speech on I Have a Dream. So he fought for several years. He was discouraged. Little did he know he would be making a big difference. Let's talk about the oldest type of discrimination that exists. And if you're not familiar with this symbol, this is the Star of David. This is the symbol for people of the Jewish religion. One of the oldest types of discrimination is called anti-Semitism, which is anti-Jewish prejudice. People that specifically are discriminating or have a prejudice against people that are Jewish. This word not that common in South Texas because there's not that many people of the Jewish religion. However, in many parts of the United States, this word is much more well known. Some examples of anti-Semitism. Now, you don't need to know these for the test. I'm just simply giving you examples. And the First Crusade in 1096 was very anti-Semitic. They were exiled from England in 1290, exiled from Spain 1492, exiled in Portugal in 1497. Once again, you don't need to know this for the exam. I'm just giving you examples of anti-Semitism. There is this book that stated that Jewish people were trying to take over the world. This book proved to be just false, not based in reality, but a lot of people use this book to be anti-Semitic. And of course, we all know about the Nazi Party from World War II. Anti-Semitism, the oldest form of discrimination and prejudice.